In 1956, Morocco and Tunisia gained their independence, but Algeria was still a French colony. But why? First, we need to understand that Algeria, as a French colony, was different from the rest of France's colonies around the world in that it technically wasn't a colony. What do you mean it wasn't a colony? It means that Algeria was, according to the French law, 100% a part of the French Republic. It was on the same legal level as Paris, Marseille, Bordeaux, or any other place in France. In comparison, Tunisia and Morocco were protectorates, not part of the French Republic. But that didn't mean that Algerians had the same rights as the French. Algerians weren't French citizens, they were subjects, and as subjects, they weren't citizens. And without citizenship, they couldn't vote or determine their political future. At the same time, there were many French people living in Algeria, making up about 10% of the population. These French people were treated exactly as if they were in France. They could vote, run for office, and were legally considered to be in France. That was the political situation from when Algerian territories were annexed by France in 1848 up until 1919. After the First World War, the French government gave part of the Algerian population the right to vote and introduced tax equality, meaning Algerians and French people would be taxed equally. These reforms helped boost Algerian nationalist activities. But even then, Algerians still didn't have the right to be full French citizens. Legally, they remained subjects and did not enjoy the same rights as the French citizens. On top of that, there was economic inequality between the Algerians and the French. For example, Europeans controlled large portions of farmland. That was important because agriculture was a major part of Algeria's economy. Europeans also held more power in local government positions. In this context, tensions increased between the French and the Algerians. Then came World War II. It's important to understand that during the war, France itself was heavily damaged, and its global power declined along with its ability to control its colonies. Vietnam declared independence after the war, and pressure from nationalist movements in Syria and Lebanon forced the French to withdraw from there too. So France no longer had the capacity to hold on to all of its colonies, and within this context, efforts to liberate Algeria increased. The main party advocating for independence was the National Liberation Front. In 1954, after a series of developments between the French and the Algerians, the situation escalated into armed conflict between the FLN and French forces. Even though France had already been defeated in Vietnam and wasn't strong enough to hold on to its colonies, the French still didn't want to give up Algeria, for several reasons. First, to the French, Algeria was seen as an integral part of their country, just like Hawaii is part of the United States, especially because there were many French people living there. Second, Algeria was important to the French economy. France depended on Algeria's natural resources. In this context, the country entered a war for independence. The FLN used guerrilla tactics, indirect or irregular fighting, and the French responded strongly, sending about 400,000 soldiers to Algeria. To understand how big that number is, the number of French people living in Algeria was between about 1 million and 1.5 million people, so the number of soldiers was about a third to a half of the total French civilian population there to begin with. But even with that, the resistance continued, and the FLN didn't go anywhere. The party received support from other Arab countries, especially Egypt, or more specifically, Gamal Abdel Nasser. Nasser was anti-colonialism and believed in Arab unity, so this was an opportunity for him to support an Arab movement against colonialism. The FLN also used tunnels and safe havens in Tunisia and Morocco. Tunisia and Morocco had gained their independence from France, unlike Algeria, for several reasons. The first of which, as mentioned before, being that Algeria was considered to be a part of the French Republic, whereas Tunisia and Morocco were protectorates. The war was very bloody for both sides, and the French actions during the war drew heavy criticism, not only from other countries, but even from within France itself. The country was divided between those who supported independence and those who didn't. So when the French Parliament agreed to start negotiations with the Algerians, a group of French officers in Algeria went and occupied the French island of Corsica and threatened the French government, saying that they would launch a campaign against Paris. In this crisis, General Charles de Gaulle was asked to come out of retirement to unite the country and prevent a civil war. De Gaulle was different. He increased the French presence in Algeria and launched new military operations. At the same time, however, he expanded voting rights to more Algerians and granted unconditional amnesty to the FLN. But that didn't change the course of the war, and many Algerians still saw independence as the only solution. De Gaulle acknowledged the possibility of self-governance and promised a referendum within 4 years. For France, the war had already consumed a lot of resources trying to suppress the Algerian Revolution, and failed. Continuing the war would only use up more resources and worsen their international reputation, which was already damaged by colonialism and the war. But not everyone in France supported de Gaulle's push for independence. A group of extremist French officers in Algiers formed a terrorist organization called the Secret Army Organization, which carried out attacks against both French and Algerians. Additionally, other generals in Paris tried to launch a coup against de Gaulle, but failed because the soldiers didn't support the coup. A year later, the same group also attempted to assassinate de Gaulle, but failed again, and each failed attempt decreased public support for them. While the OAS was trying to thwart independence talks, the French government held secret meetings with the FLN to arrange a French withdrawal and grant Algerian self-rule. Algerian independence was finally achieved through the Evian Accords and a subsequent referendum on separation from France, and that's how Algeria became independent.